Hello, everybody. Well, firstly, thank you for your time. My name is Mark Swarbrick. I'm the Principal Presales Consultant for MySQL, covering the UK and Ireland, which is a very technical way of saying it's just me covering MySQL. So really today, what I want to go through is just talking about some of the new technologies that are going on inside MySQL, and mainly that really is the way of dealing with data structures in both a structured SQL way and in a non-structured JSON document store way. Now, my background, I actually came from a sort of more sysadmin, hardware, Unix kind of environment. So for me, coming on board with MySQL in the last 5 years and learning from the developer side, it's been quite interesting because it's not something that I've had to deal with in depth. I normally sort of make the gag that developers don't always make the best DBAs, but I think, this may be not the right environment to make that kind of joke. So, quick show of hands, how many people are actually actively developing or developing against MySQL? Just quick show of hands in the room. Cool. That's also a test to see who's awake after lunch, so thank you for that one. So, I found it really interesting, and I think there's a lot of... One thing we're not particularly good at inside MySQL, inside Oracle, of doing is actually pushing the message out about what developments are going on and what things we're doing. Now, MySQL 8 has been released. People may ask what happened to all the version numbers in between. Apparently, it's just cool to skip a load of version numbers these days, so we've jumped from 5.7 to 8. So you haven't really missed anything, but there's been a lot of work that's been going on behind the scenes to try and make it actually more flexible in the way people want to develop. So we've looked and listened to developers. We've got quite an active user groups and communities and forums and things like that. So we are listening, things are changing, and a lot's going on. Usual Oracle safe harbor statement that just ignore anything I say, basically, or you can't commit on it or something like that, so I'll skip past that. So really the agenda today is just talking about the differences between relational and NoSQL databases, looking at the MySQL document store, and then just a few takeaways, and I've been told I have to do a live demo. I hate doing live demos because I'm cursed, but we'll see how it goes today, and I'll just run a few commands at you and show you how things hang together. So just to give you a brief overview, relational versus non-relational. So relational databases, I personally don't think are necessarily a bad thing. You've got data integrity, you can do normalization, you can have constraints, primary and foreign keys. In other words, it's good at keeping your data structured and normalized and consistent, which generally are the things that you want out of a data set. Atomicity, consistency, isolation, and durability. You may have heard of this ACID sort of term, this ACID compliance term. So, whether that counts for transactions or whether that counts for individual queries, it's, people know SQL. It's a really powerful, strong query language, and it's been around for many years. And typically, it's quite relatively straightforward to take, the concept of having tables and rows and relationships and take that out of MS SQL and put that into MySQL or DB2 or whatever it may be and move it around. But essentially what we're seeing is this, I think a few years ago, the NoSQL document style databases stormed onto the scene. And I think it's like any new technology. A lot of people are very, very interested in getting hold of it and consuming it and using it. But I think with any technology, there is no magic bullet. And for me, my sales guys like me in some ways, but dislike me in other ways, because I'll go along and I'll always want to see the best technology for use for the application. And I think that pure NoSQL databases like Mongo, etc., have an absolute, there's a really good niche and a really good place for them. But because I come from a sort of more sysadmin background, I see all the DevOps and all the other operational challenges that you face. Like, it's actually quite nice to know that your data is consistent, to be able to back it up, to be able to have the support, to be able to replicate nicely, and all the other things, and be able to monitor it and all that kind of stuff. So, the way that developers might want to work, or the way a company might want to structure its data, or have those sort of protections in place, might actually be at odds with each other. So what we're trying to do inside MySQL with the document store is to give you kind of the best of both worlds. So essentially, you look at the document store model, and it looks on front of it great. You've taken away all the annoying things that I don't like about having to build an application or a data store around an application. So it's like, well, I don't need to know what the schema is. I don't mind if it grows. There's no schema design. There's no normalization. There's no foreign keys. There's no data types. It's really quick and easy to spin something up and to have a document store behind whatever you're doing. It's really flexible, whether you're using embedded arrays or objects. it's just really, really nice. You've got object persistence without the use of any ORM or mapping or any object-orientated stuff, anything like that. With JSON, it's close to the front end, it's native in JavaScript, it's easy to learn. So it gives you this really nice, flexible, structured, sort of rapid application data store model to use. But like anything, there's always downsides to both. So I always prefer pictures rather than sort of just witching on. So this is how I was taught. I did a sort of business IT degree many, many years ago, and I remember doing my sort of B trees and my normalization and all that other fun stuff. And it seemed a very prescribed, structured way to do it, but you did get quite a nice, consistent outcome. Whereas on the right, you can see you've generated a model there where you can just create a document and put the data in it. So it's how our DBA see data is on the left, and then how developers see data on the right. So you can see there's two very distinct methods of attacking this. So previously, it's been which technology do I use? Now, luckily in my job, I get to see loads and loads of different areas of business, from big multinationals to tiny little small startups. And I can tell you, hand on heart, that a lot of the time, the right technology solution or the technology solution isn't necessarily chosen through scientific methods. It may be, well, this is what we know, so we're using SQL Server, or we've got licenses, so this is what we're going to use. Or it could be, oh, well, the development guy wanted this on his CV, so he used this technology, we're not quite sure why, and he left 6 months ago, and now... So, you've got these sort of questions about which technology to use. And, for me, it's always about use of the right technology, both in terms of how quick it is to build an application or to model or make changes, or schema design and schema growth, but also the kind of boring stuff like, how do we make sure it's backed up, who's going to support it, who inside the organization can actually maintain it. So I speak to some of the more agile organizations and I sort of ask them, so what technologies are you using? And they go, all of them. Which is, is great, but it is a bit scary as well in terms of having to support them all. So what we're trying to do inside MySQL is be a bit flexible and say, why not both with the same DBMS? So what we've got inside MySQL is the document store model. So really what we're trying to do is give you a solution for all. So you can use a schemaless design using JSON documents, or use a schema. The actual data set underneath, as I'll show you, is actually the same. So whatever you do in a document style model, just persist into SQL tables, so you can query something in JavaScript, Perl, Python, or just run pure SQL against it as well. So it's really nice. It gives you rapid prototyping, simpler APIs, and with all the other cool operational stuff that was my life, until a few years ago, which is all the performance management, replication, backup, restore, the tooling, schema upgrades, all that kind of stuff. So as a business owner, the things that they care about, don't lose my data. I want my data to be consistent. I need to make sure that, we don't lose a transaction, all that kind of stuff. You want to capture all of the data. Like the biggest problem I've seen customers get into in a traditional SQL model is where, funnily enough, the business has evolved or the product has evolved, and you've got what was quite a good schema with loads of nasty stuff tacked onto it until it really doesn't work and doesn't work together. So you almost want this. It'd be great not to have a schema and be able to grow, but it's quite nice to be ACID as well. So what we've tried to do inside MySQL is give you this sort of MySQL document store. So you can still have relational tables and foreign keys. You can talk to it in a NoSQL model, so you don't have to write any SQL if you don't want to, with the concept of JSON documents and schemaless JSON collections. These schemaless JSON collections, as well as the JSON documents, actually persist physically on the server as SQL tables, and the demo will hopefully show you that. So it gives you the option to write schemaless and then query in SQL or vice versa, but the underlying data you can do cool things like in a JSON document, you can then create a temporary table, create an index on that table and query it just as you would. You can have pure SQL relational tables and do a JSON extract and extract functions from that and then query that. So we're really trying to be as flexible as we possibly can. And a lot of this comes with a few features that we've actually implemented in a later version of 5.7 or version 8 like we have now. So those are things like the X Dev API and the X protocol, which is a new native protocol to MySQL, which can talk CRUD, so create, read, update, and delete, or you can do it full SQL like you would before. You can just talk JSON directly using JavaScript or Perl or whatever. So we're really trying to make it as flexible as we can, yet still be able to use all the MySQL tools you've used before, like MySQL dump and restore and replication and all the other stuff, to persist and have a really nice ACID model there as well. So I'm waffling on a little bit. So with the X Dev API, we've got connectors to C++, Java, .NET, NodeJS, Python, PHP, and all the other languages are going to be coming on board. It is still quite new at the moment. You've got the MySQL Shell, which I think is a very cool thing, because I've always been a sort of bash, Perl, sed, awk script guy. That's my background. So the ability of MySQL Shell to actually interactively chuck JavaScript at it, bring up JSON documents, do all that manipulation just interactively, I think is a really nice way to do it. You've got admin functions, so if you're doing automation or scripting, the MySQL Shell gives you a really nice way to sort of script things in or out and process automation, all that kind of stuff, which is really nice. Non-blocking, asynchronous, supports CRUD operations, so it really is sort of quite flexible. Basically you've got this concept of documents and collections. So collections are essentially containers for documents. And then you can have one or more indexes on them with a unique name. Then they exist within a single schema. And then you can add, find, modify, remove, extract, do some functions on them, or even run SQL against them. So it really is quite flexible. So this MySQL X Dev API included in the shell and the connectors, so you can do the CRUD operations like a collection add, find, modify, remove, all that kind of stuff as well. But the document store underneath is fully ACID. So when you make a transaction or you add a record or add a document, anything like that, underneath it's still tables which are stored inside MySQL. So you'll see there's a var binary which will be the ID, and then there's a native JSON data type which then stores the data. Then you can do SQL JSON functions on that to extract data and pull stuff out. So it really is flexible both ways you want to do it. So looking at this, you can just talk the native SQL CLI like you used to. I won't touch on it too much today, but we've got the concept of MySQL clustering with InnoDB cluster. So now we've got a complete end-to-end solution for high availability of MySQL, a minimum of 3 servers. If one server was to die, the other 2 take over, and MySQL router does the traffic routing. So again, we've got quite a nice end-to-end high availability solution there as well. With the X Dev API, you can talk native JSON as well into JavaScript, Python, SQL. Change the output formats, all that kind of cool stuff. So there's loads and loads going on at the moment. I mean, one of the core things is that all this, the JSON data type, the X Dev API, the shell, everything is all built together in MySQL. I know previously you might have had to install separate programs, separate applications, or separate features, things like that. One of the things that, as a sales consultant speaking to customers, we really try to push back on quite a lot is, look, everything has got to work together. If a customer downloads something, everything's got to be cross-tested and tested together. So the shell is going to work with the new cluster implementation, which is going to work with the new JSON data type, all of that kind of stuff. So there's a bit of flux towards the end of 5.7 where people were changing different versions and adding different things, but it's all pretty much been harmonized really nicely in version 8. We've actually got some customers using this kind of thing in a live production environment now and are really liking the flexibility of working that they can have. So essentially, with the X Dev API, we've got connectors for Java, .NET, NodeJS, C++, Python, PHP, and of course the old school ODBC drivers, but there are going to be more to come. So there is a lot going on inside MySQL, trying to give you the flexibility to be able to sort of get this and, just have a flexibility of working. And to be honest, not necessarily have to go down a pure NoSQL route, whether it's a MongoDB or whichever one you want to go down. I think there's lots of benefits of being able to have that flexibility, having a relational model as well as a document style model as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to run you through just a really quick demo. It's not particularly sort of dynamic or whizzy or anything else, but hopefully it will make that little light bulb go off so you can see how you connect, what sort of commands you can chuck at it, and the relationship between the SQL tables and how it works with JSON. And then hopefully, have 5 minutes, you can come and grab me afterwards for a quick Q&A or something like that. So hopefully this will work and I can actually read it. So the first thing is, by using the shell, it's just a MySQL sh command. So you can see at the moment I've got port 3306. Hopefully everyone can just about read that. So if you connect on the standard port, you can see that it's a classic session. So it's not using the X protocol, it's just using the standard protocol. So if I was to quit and then connect to the other port, you can see that it's an X session. So by being an X session, that means we can take advantage of the extra features, talk to it natively in JavaScript or SQL. So you can see that, and this reminds me of the old MS-DOS prompts where you could change making the colourful prompts and all the old Novell stuff. I'm probably showing my age now, but you can see that down there you've got the JavaScript. So if I was to do /SQL, for example, I can now talk to it in SQL. So you can see you can actually talk to Shell in native JavaScript. You could do the same in native Perl or native SQL and switch back. So we want to talk to it in JavaScript for the moment. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a schema called test, and you can see that's been created there. Then what we're going to do, we're going to create a collection on top of that schema, and this one we're going to call posts. So it's just a nice simple syntax, db create collection posts, and you can see that hasn't done it. Yeah, thank you. See, this is why having good people around is useful. Thank you. Okay, so we've corrected posts. It's good to know you've got my back. I appreciate that. I thought you were going to let me suffer for a little while longer, so thank you. So what we're going to do then is we're going to just add an item there, and you can see that it's structured within the JSON document. Then we'll create another one just here. You can see that was worked okay. And then just to show you that there is some validation there, if we were to add something that wasn't valid, you'd get an error like that. So what we'll do, we'll also add another collection in restaurants, and we'll just add these very quickly. Sorry. Yeah, thank you. Do that first. It would have if I created the collection first, wouldn't it? Okay. And then what we'll do, we'll then create this one. So I didn't even attempt to type this because my typing skill, the more people watch me, the worse my typing gets. Okay, so we've entered 3 entries there. So if we were to do, just for example, a db.posts.find without any parameters, you can see that they're both returned here. So then what we can do, we can actually execute SQL within the JavaScript. So we can just do a describe posts. So you can see here that the underlying data store that gets created in here is you've got an ID field, which was added automatically if you don't specify it, and then you've got the JSON data type, which contains the data. So you can see that you're working with documents, you're working with native JavaScript, but underneath it's still tables that get created. So those you can still do native MySQL replication on, you can do clustering on, you can back up, all that other kind of cool stuff that's still there for a standard relational model. So for example, now, so we've done the describe post. So if I was to do a show create restaurants, for example, it's exactly like it was native SQL, and you can see you've got the restaurants with the create table underneath, and it's still InnoDB. So for those that have been using traditional MySQL, actually, just quick show of hands, who's actually using MySQL on a regular basis still? Okay, so there's quite a few. So just to give you a little bit of history, with MySQL, there used to be sort of two main data types, which is the MyISAM or InnoDB data types. Now, InnoDB was another sort of storage engine which was designed by Innobase. Oracle acquired Innobase actually before they acquired MySQL. So if anyone's still using the legacy MyISAM storage engine, it's kind of table level locking, no foreign key support, but it is very quick for reads. All of the development really since about 5.6, 5.7 has been going on around InnoDB. So from becoming a plugin to the default storage engine to the main one that's being developed. So if you see any of the cool new technologies and everything else, and especially like the enterprise tools, enterprise backup, and the GTID, the global ID support, all that kind of stuff, it's all based around InnoDB rather than MyISAM. So just little sort of pointer there into the background. Okay, where do we get to? Show create table restaurants. So you can execute SQL on it. So even though we've entered the data as a JSON document, we can still execute SQL against it and get a response back. So for example, you can do a find, or you can even do a find and a limit. So if we do a find and a limit, for example, you can see we've limited it to the first one, and if we take the limit off, you can see that all three get returned. So very, very similar to what you're probably used to before. And then we can modify the data as well. So for example, you can do a DB restaurants modify and change the cuisine type to Italian. Happens to be my favorite. And you can see the query's modified it, and then we can find by the ID, for example, there. And you can see we've modified the cuisine type to be Italian. So you've got this hybrid approach, which I think is really nice. You've got this concept of transactions as well. So we could do a session start transaction, for example. And then we can remove one of the restaurants. So that's one item affected. And then if we do a find on that, you can see that it's an empty set. And we can do the same to another collection. We can go into like posts, for example. You can see there's two there, and the title there is MySQL 8 Rocks. No bias at all. So we can do modify that. And because it auto-created the ID, obviously I can't have it in my cheat sheet, so we're going to have to copy that ID. And change it to hybrid database. If I could type. Yeah. There we go. Okay, so that's changed. And then if we do a DB post find, you'll see that the data has actually been changed, which it has. It's now a hybrid database, which is good. And then hopefully, if you do a session rollback, and we can do and see that the data has indeed, should have rolled back. Yeah, there you go, it's changed back to MySQL 8 Rocks. So you can see that you still have the concept of transaction as well, which is really nice. One of the things which I found particularly interesting is the ability to be able to add an index to a collection. So this one is just a DB restaurants create index, call the name of the index, and then what fields you want to index. So that should have worked. And then if we switch to SQL mode, and then use test, and then if you do show create table restaurants, you should be able to see that there is an index now on that data. So again, this is just trying to show the relationship between what you can do with JSON JavaScript and the underlying SQL that's there as well. So what we can do now is, for example, is a simple query on the JSON table. So I'll use this one because it looks a bit nicer. So remember, we inputted this using JavaScript and JSON. There was no SQL involved in it. And you can see now that what we've managed to do is we can select ID, style, you can use a function, so in this case average on the rating. So what we've got is this JSON table, and then we're choosing the elements inside the JSON array, and then we've created a temporary table now and even done aggregation functions. Another thing in MySQL 8, there are some window functions available as well. So for those that are used to developing perhaps against SQL Server, something like that, that miss the window functionality of MySQL, that is something you can do in version 8 as well. So hopefully, we're actually a little bit ahead of time, which is really good. So what we can do as well is some other functions like this one. So you can see here, we've done a select as the name, and then actually, a select average. So we've done an aggregation on that as well, using the JSON table there as well. So you can see there's a really nice sort of hybrid approach between the two. I think Shell is a really great way to be able to sort of play around with some of these features, be able to get data in and out really quickly. And it's really nice to develop against. So if you wanted to work with a pure document style sort of document style setup, like we've got one really brilliant example is we've got a customer that's developing smart meters, and they want to embed MySQL inside these smart meters to do stat aggregation and stuff like that. The binary of MySQL is still surprisingly small. I did a cross-compilation demo on some Raspberry Pis a couple of years ago. Really nice because I could even compile it up on ARM, get it all there. Really nice, embedded, start quickly. Reason I'm probably a little bit scattered today is I came back from Israel yesterday while I was talking at another conference and talking to some customers. And again, they're doing some really cool things with embedded security devices, as you can imagine, and routers and things like that. So the fact that you can get MySQL embedded inside it, but they were particularly interested in the JSON capability, because for them, their device is continually evolving and the features they're doing is continually changing. At the moment, one of their biggest frustrations is every time there's a feature update, they've got to push out a schema update. And having to push out a schema update in live data where they're aggregating lots of stats is actually quite difficult to do. And especially where you've got some really large tables, even adding a not null or adding an index to something can actually be quite a painful operation. So they really love the idea that they can just evolve their JSON style document to have just say it's a power smart meter, for example. Instead of just having voltage, they could have light switch operational, any other extra functionality they want, just by evolving the document. And yet it's still, their DevOps guys love it because you can still back it up, you can still do replication, and they can still use traditional MySQL for whether it's session management or any financial data or whatever they're doing with any other logging inside the application. So the ability to work in two different ways and to access the same data in two different ways, I think is really powerful. The other thing which I haven't touched on today, which I just want to touch on just quickly, is also the memcached interface. So there's another interface into MySQL over the top where you can do very simple CRUD applications if you want to use MySQL as a key value store. And that actually bypasses a lot of the SQL parsing, but has direct links into the tables as well. So again, what we're trying to do is as flexible as we can in terms of all the different ways that you can get data in, get data out, but also manage what's going on. So I'd really advise you have a play around. MySQL 8 is GA as of a couple of weeks ago. It is all still fairly bleeding edge stuff. It is GA, so it is generally available. So all the beta testing's been done, and we do think it's production ready, but it is still quite a new feature. We've got a couple of guys based in Belgium and another one in the UK, which are actively monitoring all the developer forums and all the MySQL forums. So we'd really encourage you to have a play, have a use of it. If there's features you haven't got, don't just sit there muttering, actually let us know. One of the really nice things about working for MySQL under Oracle, because I was always a bit worried, because traditionally I worked for startups and smaller companies, and I was always worried about joining big Oracle and what Oracle was going to do to MySQL as an open source background. And really, they've done the best thing they possibly could. They've kind of left us alone as a global business unit. We've got our own website. They always call us the hippies in the jeans that work from home compared to the mainstream Oracle, which I'm happy for them to call us that. That really doesn't bother me. But what's really nice is they've invested money, they've invested time. The product's gone from strength to strength since 5.5, 5.6, 5.7, and now the jump to 8. It's still under the GPL, so all of the features I talked about today are included in the open source version of MySQL, so you can take it, use it, consume it. But what's really nice is we've got a really good story when you want to start to scale. We can provide 24/7, 365, follow the sun support for all of this. I talked about the InnoDB cluster and the router. That's something we can support end to end. And included in the support, what we also give you is free consultative support. So if you've got any questions at any time, I remember it's always 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, things aren't working, everyone's shouting at you, and the only people you've got to turn to are the forums. Whereas with us, you can use the same My Oracle support page as you would for mainstream Oracle, where you're paying orders of magnitude more money. Get support about syntax, about optimization, query optimization, index rules, optimizer hints, all of that kind of stuff, and actually get support around that as well. So I think that's something really worth looking at. So hopefully you found it interesting. As you probably can guess, this isn't my deep area of expertise, but I have found it really interesting actually sort of having a look at all the different ways you can access MySQL. As I said, we've got some live customers using this at the moment. And really, being blunt, what Oracle's trying to do is trying to get as many people onto MySQL and actually listen to developers, listen to the way people are using data. So, we've got Docker images built up with MySQL Shell and MySQL all ready to go. We're working a lot in the community forums, looking at microservices, which I know have been on the agenda as well. So I think instead of being a big database monolith that's just wanting you to go down a certain route and consume in a certain way, we're still very cross-platform. We've got a surprising number of people using MySQL on Windows for whatever reason, so that they're still doing that. But we've got Linux users, we've got Solaris users, we've got people cross-compiling MySQL, embedding it inside devices. So this is just another way that we're trying to be flexible in terms of the ways of using MySQL. The MySQL server team blog, I think, is really fantastic as well. So one of the things we're actually doing is blogging about all the new versions, all the new things we're doing, and actually some of the design decisions that we're making along the way. We have this thing called the CAF, which is the Customer Advisory Forum as well. So if there is anything you want to contribute, or you think we've gone down the wrong direction, or even blunt as, this is MongoDB's got this, we want this, or actually we'd like to manipulate the data in a slightly different way. We're very open to talking to you. So please don't, as developers, you are what drives ownership and usage of MySQL. So we really want to hear a lot more about what's going on. So hopefully it was interesting for you guys. If you have any questions, hopefully ones I can answer, please come and grab me afterwards. Otherwise, thank you very much for your time, and I'll give you 5 minutes of your life back. Thank you.